Hello and welcome to episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Sunday, November 12th. It is week 10 of the 2023 NFL season. The season is flying by. Another exciting week ahead of us. I'm Blair, also known as Bubbs, alongside DiMari. DiMari, thanks for coming on again. How's it going, man?
I'm good. How you doing?
Doing good. Excited to get into all of today's action. We'll break down a couple games today as there is a lot of exciting matchups to look forward to today, week 10 of the NFL season. I'll start with this. What is your overall thoughts going in today's games? Obviously, Cowboys, play Giants later on, and then my Jets will face off against the Raiders a little bit later on as well on Sunday night. Apologize to the rest of the NFL world that's got to watch that offense. Apologize. It's not my decision. That's the NFL's decision. But what are your thoughts about some of these games going in today before we break down each matchup and get you set up for another good weekend of football?
Kind of similar to last week. We got a lot of games with a lot of playoff indications.
Yep.
Browns and Ravens, and they're both kind of neck and neck in division right now. We have a good game in Jacksonville with the 49ers. See if the Niners can bounce back after their 3-game skid. So it's going to be some good football this week once again.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Definitely agree. So we'll start there, as you mentioned, with the Niners, Jacksonville, down in Jacksonville. This should be a lot of fun. I think this might be the best game of the weekend. 5-3 Niners team, 6-2 Jaguars team. This is a really interesting matchup because you have two teams going in completely different directions. You have a Jacksonville team that is dominating right now. They've won 5 straight. They're running away with the AFC South. And you have a Niners team that is lost 3 straight. Brock Purdy, the questions start to arise if his hot streak, his ability to go out there and play well and is starting to kind of wear off a little bit as Mr. Irrelevant. We'll start with the Niners side of things since we touched on them the past couple of weeks. Do you feel the Niners are beginning to fall apart? Do you feel this bye week is going to rejuvenate them a little bit, come out on the road and beat a Jacksonville team that is obviously the hottest team in football right now? What are your thoughts from a Niners perspective going into this game?
I wouldn't say fall apart, but the injuries to Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, you do see a big difference with their offense. And, Brock Purdy has to do a lot more than what he had to do when everybody else was healthy.
Yep.
So luckily for him, he does. I believe he gets Deebo back this week because he was a full participant all week in practice. So that team's going to look a little different today. And I think coming out of the bye week, they kind of know, and also looking at Seattle, they kind of know Seattle's slowly starting to creep up on them. So I think they're going to look actually pretty good today, kind of similar to how they looked during that 5-game winning streak, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, I expect, their well-coached Shanahan to come out, have them playing good competitive football. I don't think this is going to be a game where Jacksonville or Niners are going to, I think it's going to be a close game, meaning from a Jacksonville perspective, I don't think they're going to blow them out of the water. Something else to know, too, Jacksonville is now tasked with stopping not only Nick Bosa off the edge, but Chase Young, who obviously was dealt from Washington over to San Francisco. What was your thoughts on that pickup? Because that was just a crazy move. It was like from a Niners perspective, they didn't really need another edge rusher, but they went out and got one, and their defense only got better. How do you feel he's going to impact the Niners from now they have 2 of some of the better edge rushers in football?
Well, I'm not sure if you have the NFL app, but if you do, notifications come in very late. So
Yep.
I was at work and I saw Adam Schefter, release the news and I almost dropped to my knees because where does the Niners get all this money from for all these players?
Exactly.
But I think it's definitely going to give a boost to that team. I'm really not too sure why it didn't work out in Washington, so I'm still kind of curious on why it didn't. But with what they have over there, and now you're not able to, double team Bosa because you have to respect Young on that other side. It's gonna be, it's gonna be a long day for Trevor Lawrence, but also quarterbacks moving forward. I feel like that defense is gonna take another step, adding Chase Young to what they already have.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting situation as to why they dealt Sweat and Chase Young. I don't really stand the Bears' perspective of going out and getting Montez Sweat and signing him to an extension when they're in a rebuild, but I guess it's just the Bears. They do those things. But yeah, the Niners didn't need it, but it's another piece, and it's another piece to just be dominant. And on top of that, they've also got guys like Fred Warner, who's one of the best linebackers in football. They've got pieces all over that defense that can dominate and wreck games to opposing offenses. So you go to the opposing team now, Jacksonville. They're going to have to handle all that. They've won 5 straight. They've had some really impressive victories. Coming to this game, hottest team in football. They're starting to really find their groove after that slow 1-2 start where people were wondering, was last year kind of just a 1-year thing? Are they going to have a regression year? And they've shut a lot of those people up, because I was one of those people that was a little concerned about them. Like, was last year kind of just a one big year for them and they're going to regress a little bit because they've won 5 straight and they've looked good. What is your thoughts on Jacksonville during this long winning streak?
They have looked a lot better than what they started the year off. When the year first started, it kind of like, well, there's Jacksonville again.
Yep.
All the hype was for nothing, but they're starting to figure out. They're starting to come around, and I'm just thinking they kind of need to get some more pieces involved in that offense. Calvin Ridley for say. So once they start to get some other guys figured out, trying to get them, more involved in the offense, I feel like they're going to take another step. Defenses looked well enough for them to play. You don't need to have a great defense when your offense is that good. As long as the defense is well enough to stop teams and force some turnovers here and there, they're going to be all right.
Do you feel Trevor Lawrence can? Because again, you look at he's been solid, but do you still feel like Trevor Lawrence can take another step to? Like, he's been, number 1 overall pick. He's been good, but I still feel like there's another step for him to take to really become that number 1 elite quarterback. Do you feel the same way, or do you feel he's kind of hit his? I don't want to say apex, but do you feel the kind of this is what he is, or do you still feel there's another step or two that he can take to really become that elite quarterback?
I feel like there's another step. When you watch him, you're like, wow, he makes some really good plays, some really good throws. He can extend plays, but I really can't put my finger on it right now. But there is something where maybe next year, maybe 2 years from now, 3 years down the road, where he is going to take that another step and be like elite. He's just not there yet.
Yeah, I still feel like that step's coming where he can go up there and compete with a Burrow or compete with a Mahomes, get on not that crazy Hall of Fame level, but get on that level of elite quarterbacks, Josh Allen, those guys like that, where I still feel he's a little bit behind now, but he's getting there, and you could certainly see it where he makes some of those throws, as you mentioned, that you just kind of sit there and you just say, wow, that's all you can do, which will be another fun matchup, him against this Niners defense. So to close things out here on this matchup, who you got winning? Jacksonville comes into this one the home underdogs. Niners are the 3-point road favorites. What's the prediction for this game?
A few things here. Jacksonville has not beat the 49ers since 2005. So this game has quite, this some bragging rights a little bit for this game.
Yep.
But for the Jacksonville thing, I went last year when they played Dallas. It is very hard to play in Jacksonville when the fans behind you. But I just don't see 49ers losing 4 straight, especially coming off the bye week. So I think they're going to win in a close one today.
I think it's going to be close as well, but I'm going to actually take the home side of things. I'm going to take Jacksonville. I think they're going to stay hot. They've looked really good. I think it's close. I think it's a 24-21 type game, field goal deciding it late. I'll take Jacksonville over the Niners. Jacksonville stays hot. Doesn't mean that I don't think the Niners are going to make the playoffs, because they've got the Bucks next week, which could be a bounce back game for them. But I'm going to take Jacksonville just because they're the hot team. But I think it's definitely close. And I could see the Niners coming out of the bye and playing well as well. So we move on here to Baltimore, Cleveland, a nice AFC North showdown. We'll start with Baltimore because we talked about them last week against the Seahawks. They have been so good. They've got the best point differential in football right now at plus 115. They've won 4 straight. They've got maybe only outside of Jacksonville, you could say they're the other hot team in the NFL right now, 7-2. They're looking at a top spot right now in the AFC. What has been your thoughts on Baltimore this year? They've just been, and they're blowing teams out. These games aren't even close right now. Blew Detroit out, blew Seattle out. We'll see if Cleveland's another victim of a blowout today. But what is your thoughts on Baltimore? I mean, they've been so good this season.
Yeah, it all started with that Detroit game. Something kind of just sparked them in that Detroit game. And ever since then, it's just like it's been through the roof for them. But I'm actually quite surprised because they're still not even throwing the ball that well. And, the receivers aren't getting that involved. And they're still 35 points here, 30 points here.
Yeah,
I also feel like once they find that balance, like that run-pass balance, they're going to be a lot more scary than they already are sitting at 7-2.
Yeah, it's definitely been something that I've always known that Baltimore is always going to be that playoff team. But I feel like with the Harbaugh and Lamar, since they've, obviously since Lamar's came into the league, I think this is the best team that he's had or Lamar's been on. Like, I think Baltimore's always been solid, but they've never been this dominant. They've always been that team that, and again, the playoff struggles are evident. I mean, They don't necessarily, Lamar's playoff record is not great. I think it's 1-3 or something like that. It's not great. So you still got to see what the playoffs bring as long as they continue this trend. But this is the best they've looked I've seen since Lamar has been on the team. They've been so dominant, blowing everybody out. What is your thoughts on Cleveland? They're an interesting team. Deshaun Watson, gets the big contract. Last year, barely played with the suspension. This year, they won some games without him. PJ Walker defeated the Browns, or the Niners rather, and then they also defeated the Colts and all that, with Walker again, with Watson leaving that game with an injury. What has been your thoughts on Watson? He's kind of not quite what we saw in Houston. Some games they're winning in spite of him because their defense is so good, which is going to be a fun matchup to watch today. What is your thoughts on Watson? Not quite, I don't think, the player that many expected. I mean, not living up to the contract, that's for sure.
I just don't think he's going to get back to that Houston form. I feel like those days are behind him. I mean, you watch him and he makes some great plays and you're just like, all right, he's kind of looking like himself again. But then you see some kind of the interceptions he throws and you're just like, what are you looking at?
Yeah.
So I think those days are behind him, especially now where he doesn't really have to rely on himself to go out and win games. A lot of it is like, let's run the ball effectively and force him to not have to make much mistake. So I just Houston days are behind him. I don't think we're gonna get like that MVP level Watson probably ever again.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. He's just, I don't know if it's age. I don't know if it was the year he took off. He just hasn't been the same. He looks not the same. That's all I really got to say about that. What are your thoughts on the rest of the offense, though? Like how they've bounced back and rebounded from a running back standpoint? They obviously added Hunt. They've got Jerome Ford after the brutal, just awful Nick Chubb injury that he obviously suffered early in the season against Pittsburgh.
I know it's going to sound weird, but I feel like they're just bouncing around with running backs too much. Each week there's a different lead back getting majority of the touches. You get Jerome Ford one week, then it's Kareem Hunt, and then it's Pierre Strong. And it's just like, who's going to be that lead back each and every week? You kind of never know, which it could be sort of a good thing because as a team, you kind of never know which back you have to prepare for coming into the game. But, backs have this thing where like once they're hot and they get some momentum, you can't kind of keep, switching around, pulling them out the games, lessening their carries. So they kind of got to find out who's going to be that for sure number one guy and that second guy behind him for sure who's going to be that second guy. And you kind of go with that 1-2 punch and really don't use the third guy as much unless injury, something like that.
Yeah, I hope that Chubb can, bounce back from an injury like that because that injury was just so gruesome and
terrible.
Yeah, it was awful to see. And I think, for a guy that his caliber, you just hate to see guys that good. He's up there right in the top of the league as one of the most elite running backs and is a game changer. As we've seen, as you mentioned, it's kind of been just a revolving door right now at running back, trying to figure out who's the number one, who's the guy behind the lead back. Something else to note here, which is going to be a challenge. The Ravens are very solid in coverage-wise this season. Roquan Smith and safety Geno Stone both have Geno Stone right now is the highest coverage grade in the NFL, and Roquan Smith has tied for the third highest coverage grade in the NFL. So not going to be easy for Watson to find a rhythm today on the road in Baltimore. What's your pick for this game? Who you got winning this AFC North showdown? As much as Cleveland, they've won these games ugly. They've had injuries. They're still 5-3. They're still in the heart of the playoff race in the AFC. Who you got coming out on top in this one in Baltimore?
I'm going to take Baltimore. It's going to be tough and it's going to be low scoring. I think they come in with the 1-2 in total yards and defense and in rushing, which both teams love to do. 1-3 ranked in rushing. But I'm going to give the edge to Baltimore. I just feel like they have a little bit more talent all around because if they can't run the ball as well, at least they're still able to throw the ball to multiple weapons on the perimeter. I just don't think Cleveland has that same outside of Amari Cooper and, David Njoku. You don't know what you're going to get from him each week. And it's not even on him. It's really just his target. So I'm going to take Baltimore in this one. Close one, probably 3-point win, 2017. Nothing too high scoring.
Yeah, I'm going to take Baltimore as well. It seems it's going to be one of those low-scoring AFC North defensive physical battle that we see often. I'll take Baltimore as well. You mentioned David Njoku. He might be the worst fantasy tight end ever because one week he'll go out there and put up 20 points, and in the next week he'll have 3. He's so hot, cold, inconsistent. He's one of those guys that is usually on waivers, and if you get lucky, you pick him up on a week that he plays well. So moving on here to the later slate of games, we'll start with the Cowboys. We'll go back to last week here for a second. Tough loss against the Eagles, but I still thought, just from an outside perspective, and obviously I want to hear your thoughts as well, I still thought it was the Cowboys looked a lot better against Philly than they did against San Francisco. Would you agree with that? And what was your takeaways from that game, Dallas and Philly?
That's the best Dak has played all year, 100%. And I'm not going to say like we're never going to get that again from him, because I've always been a Dak believer. So I believe we can get multiple games like that. But they finally just looked all together on like all 3 aspects of the game. Everyone looked good. Defense kind of was very bend, don't break. The offense went out there, and this is kind of first time in a while where I'm kind of watching the offense, and I'm not really too worried about if Dak is going to make mistakes. And like I want him to be aggressive and go down there and throw the ball down the field and get others involved. But thing for me just with that is Michael Gallup. He's killing this team. He's really hurting this team big time. So going into today, and I'm not taking the Giants for granted, but I kind of want to just see like Michael Gallup and some other guys get some more touches, try to get more comfortable in a week where you probably should blow this team out.
Another player too, I got to give a ton of credit to, because I totally agree with you on Dak, and I think Dak gets a lot of unnecessary hate. A part of it, I think, is he's the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys are going to get a lot of national attention, and anytime a team loses, the average, analyst, average reporter, average fan is just going to go right to the quarterback, especially when it's America's team. Everybody's talking about them. But he played great. I mean, I think that last play call late in the game, would you attribute that more to coaching, where they didn't spike it and said they ran a play? They probably could have got 2 plays off. Instead, they were only able to get 1 more. What has been your thoughts, like, just from that play? What was your perspective on that play? And then what has been your thoughts on McCarthy? Do you trust him as a head coach?
After last game, I feel like my confidence definitely boosted him. He called like a very great game up until, that last drive. Yep. But a lot of that last drive too, also, let's go into those 2 penalties we got, the false start and the delay of game. And that kind of changed up everything. But I don't feel like spiking the ball in that moment probably would have made a difference. You would have gotten another play, but there's nothing wrong with trying to take a shot to the end zone, trying to get a flag, anything. I'm just more disappointed in getting down there and the penalties and the sack where, you're right on the doorstep, and you held up, I'm talking about the offensive line, of course. You held up for the whole entire drive for the most part, and you get down there and you just start making mistakes. It's really just discipline.
Yeah, those penalties certainly hurt him. And then even that last play to the end zone, they don't suffer those penalties, 5 yards, 10 yards up. That's easily a touchdown, because it was the pass was a few yards short. That's probably not the case. Somebody else I got to give a ton of credit to, CeeDee Lamb's been so good. And I think he might, maybe this is just me, but I feel like he's not talked about as much as, people talk about A.J. Brown, people talk about Tyreek Hill. That's kind of the debate right now, is who's the best receiver in football. But CeeDee Lamb, I think, needs to be inserted in that debate, because this was another one of these games where he just absolutely dominated. 11 catches, 191 yards. I think that is now 3 straight games for him with over 100 receiving yards. I mean, he's a stud. What is your thoughts on CeeDee Lamb? I mean, the guy is one of the elite receivers in football.
So I'm going to be biased and a little unbiased at the same time, but I was going back to last year, and I've been kind of like preaching this since last season. When you look at what he's doing, I feel like it should be way more impressive, because he doesn't have a second option or a third option.
Yeah, exactly.
To take that off of him. You look at the Eagles, at least they got Devontae Smith. Yep. Washington has Jahan Dotson. I'm going to use Cincinnati. They have T. Higgins.
Miami's got Waddle.
All those teams have a second or third option where you can take that pressure off like your best playmaker. We don't have that. It's really just CeeDee Lamb just being better than whoever lines up against him. And I do like, back to what you're asking earlier about McCarthy, where now McCarthy is starting to scheme him open a lot more, use a lot more motion, use him in the slot. But he definitely deserves his credit, because what he's done these last few games is insane.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I know when he when you guys played the Jets, I don't know why. Then the Jets don't move Sauce around. I would have liked to see Sauce more in CeeDee Lamb, but I know he had a field day against us. I think he had 143 yards, and you guys blew us out. But he's been great, and I mean he's a stud. And you talk about again not having much help around him. It reminds me a little bit of Garrett Wilson, where not only does Garrett Wilson have the worst quarterback in the NFL, but he's got nobody else. He's got Lazard, who can't catch and gets a ton of penalties and is just $44 million down the drain. You got Randall Cobb, who's nothing without Rodgers, and it's a bunch of Malik Taylor, Xavier Gibson, undrafted free agent. Brownlee hasn't been active, who's an undrafted free agent. It's a whole lot of nobody after that. The Corey Davis retirement certainly hurt. So I definitely got to give a lot of credit to him to be able to put up those numbers at 1,300 yards last year and not have much help around him is a huge deal. So going into this game, I'll put my prediction out there. I think Dallas wins this game by a lot. I think they're going to be still a little bit frustrated with the way last week's game ended. They were that close, couldn't punch it in. I think they'll come out with a lot of energy at home. I mean, the Giants, they are starting Tommy DeVito. I mean, I don't really know what direction they're going to go in this offseason. I guess that's a good question there to discuss here is, what do you think the Giants do this offseason? Do you think they stick with Jones, try and build around and maybe draft the Marvin Harrison, bring in a T. Higgins or somebody like that, which I don't think will probably happen, but do they go that? Do they go out and sign a veteran? Do they draft a quarterback? What do you think the Giants do this offseason, especially if they continue to spiral and maybe only finish with 3-4 wins?
It's really hard to say. I'm really not much of a Daniel Jones believer.
Yeah,
and, when he signed that contract, I was just like, well, we're almost guaranteed 2 wins a year, because I just really don't believe in him. But you can't blame everything on Daniel Jones. Their offensive line is terrible. They have no weapons. You draft like Jalen Hyatt, and he hasn't really done much. He's not really getting the target. I would probably say you keep Jones because you signed him to that contract, and you build around him, starting with the offensive line. Offensive line is terrible, probably the worst offensive line in the league. I know there's a lot of teams that their line looks bad or worse, but they might actually do have the worst. Try to go get some weapons, some receivers in free agency. Maybe if you can draft some receivers or a receiver or two, a running back to put behind Saquon that's kind of versatile, kind of how like Miami uses A-Chain out the backfield and in the passing game. Just anything to take a lot of that pressure off Daniel Jones and not have him try to be a superhero.
Yeah, you mentioned the receiving core, and I totally agree. I obviously on the East Coast, like right in the New York area, I think there were so many people this offseason talking about, oh, our receiving core is good, this and that. Like, the Giants receiving core does not have a legitimate number one. I know they had Waller, but he has injury concerns. I really like the Hyatt pick, but he's got to develop. And I think he's been more of a deep ball, big play guy, a more 3-4 receptions for 75-yard type of guy than an actual guy that's going to go out there, have 8-9 catches for over 100 yards and be a legitimate number one. Maybe he'll develop into that, but he's only been that speed guy that can run a go and make a big play here and there. Outside of that, I mean, Paris Campbell, who, didn't do much. They got Isaiah Hodgins, Sterling Shepard. I mean, these guys are 3, 4, 5 receivers that you're asking to be your high top end guys. It's just not good enough. So I see both sides of it. I liked what I saw last year from Daniel Jones, but I mean, he still only threw 15 touchdowns. Like, was that really enough to be given $40 million? Probably not. $40 million you're supposed to cover up the negatives around you, and he hasn't been able to do that. So it's an interesting spot, but it's been a disaster, no doubt, after getting to the divisional round last year. To be 2-7 and starting Tommy DeVito is a complete 180 of what last year was. So going into this game, it's the Cowboys. It's Tommy DeVito. Who you got winning? Cowboys are a massive 17.5-point favorite. Do you think they cover that number? And who you got winning?
Well, last time you were a 17-point favorite was last year against Houston. And I don't know if you remember how that game went, but it took Dak 99 yards to win that game. So hopefully they cover, because, again, it is Tommy DeVito. Not saying that in a way like, oh, he's just another guy. But, like, inexperienced quarterback, we're talking about arguably the best defense in the league, one of the best defense in the league. They should go out and show why they are one of the best in the league and not let them stick around that game too long. Because the more confidence they get, come the second, third, fourth quarter, they just kind of look like, all right, here goes Dallas again pulling another Arizona. But I'm going to take my Cowboys today.
Yeah, I'm taking the Cowboys as well. I'm taking the Cowboys big here. They're not. I mean, the Giants, they don't really have a quarterback that's competent of throwing a pass past 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, it seems. So I'll take Dallas. I also think coming off of last week, they're going to come out with a lot of energy at home. Give me Dallas. I mean, even if Daniel Jones was playing in this game, I'd probably still take Dallas by a lot. So I'll take Dallas in this one over the Giants, and the Giants fall to 2-8, and the Cowboys, I think, will bounce back after the loss last week. So moving on here, we just went from talking about one bad offense in the Giants to another bad offense. New York football this year has not gone as planned. I got to ask you this because it was prime time last week. Another disaster for the Jets offense. Like, what are your thoughts on this offense from an outsider? Maybe I'm just too much like I've seen this before. I've been watching bad offense forever. Maybe I'm too harsh on them, but do you feel the same way that Zach Wilson just simply stinks? Like, what is your thoughts on this offense? Because the New York
Well,
Jets, they cannot move the football.
I'm going to start with this. I know all the primetime games are supposed to be for Rodgers,
Rodgers,
but
yeah.
please stop punishing us with Jets and
I know.
Raiders games on primetime. The Bears is another one. Like, I'm tired of watching them on primetime. But
Yeah.
to your question,
The Bears,
you said it earlier. It's just you have no weapons outside of Garrett Wilson. Like Allen Lazard is just I honestly don't know where he's been all season. And like you mentioned, Randall Cobb and Jason Brownlee's not playing. So like you're not using the weapons this offseason. You kind of looked at that team, at least that like wide receiver group, and just like this might be one of the best groups in football with
yeah.
Rodgers. And now it's just like, well, if we can't force the ball to Garrett Wilson 12 times a game, nobody else is going to do anything. So it's the offensive line doesn't help either. They look terrible. So it's a lot of things going on with that team right now.
Yeah.
I feel like the only bright spot of that offense or the two is going to be Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson. Everyone else is kind of just out there running suicides on Sundays.
Yeah, I feel bad for Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall as well. But Garrett Wilson, he deserves so much better than this. Like last year, he found a way to put up 1,100 yards, win Offensive Rookie of the Year with 4 different quarterbacks seeing action. Flacco, Zach Wilson, Mike White, and even Chris Streveler, who went out there in that Thursday night game against Jacksonville and was playing for, I think, the final quarter because Zach Wilson was so bad. Like, and even this year, he's found a way to, he's still got 549 yards. He's got 2 touchdowns. Like, even this season, he had 80 yards last week, 7 catches, 80 yards. And then the week before that in that Giant game where the offense, there was no offense, he found a way to have 100 receiving yards. If he just had a quarterback, I mean, he would be right up there in the top of the league. I truly believe because he is so good. He's fast. I think one of his underrated traits is his yak ability. You know, he pick up 15, 20 yards. I mean, that play against the Cowboys, I remember. I mean, he did all the work. Zach threw about 15-yard pass to him, and he did all the work the rest of the way. Feel bad for him. I feel for this defense because we have a championship caliber defense. I truly believe that. I mean, it's last week, you know, even though you might look at it and say, oh, 27 points, we let up to one of the touchdowns was on special teams, and the other one, Zach fumbled. The Chargers recovered on like the one, and they punched it in a couple of plays later, which isn't the defense's fault, putting them in that position. So it's a tough spot. I don't know. I mean, I would have signed a veteran, Carson Wentz, somebody like that who wanted to come here. Do you feel there's any light at the end of the tunnel for the Jets this season, or do you see it's just because my viewpoint of it is as much as yes, the offensive line is a problem, I still think it ultimately starts and ends with the quarterback. I also think Hackett's problem. There's so many issues. There's so many issues. You can try and flex seal it as much as you want, but the issues are there. Do you see any light at the end of the tunnel for this offense? I had hope last week. I thought that they would go out, let it rip with Zach, but I've kind of lost all hope. And the only hope I still have is the defense is really good. If they find a way to force some turnovers, put the Jets in favorable field position, then, you know, we can find ways to at least get some points. I mean, continue to kick field goals. Do you see any light at the end of the tunnel for the Jets, or is this just going to be another one of these 9-game stretches where we got to watch 9 more games of this?
It's hard to say because they're still right in the mix of the playoff hunt. And, you know, with Buffalo not looking too good, you're not going to win the division, obviously, but you can still get second place in division and try to find a wild card spot because the AFC North, I feel like Pittsburgh and Cleveland, they're going to start to slip up here, you know, in these next 9 games. Yeah. So there's some space for you. So if I'm the Jets, it's like do I just say, it is what it is and just kind of, I don't want to say tank, but kind of just wave the white flag just a little bit instead of going out there and killing your guys every Sunday? Or do I try to maybe, like you just said, go get a free agent quarterback and have him come in, maybe sit behind Zach for a week, 2 weeks? It would have been better if you could have did it before the bye week, they got that extra week to learn. But do you bring in the guy, kind of let him sit behind Zach or somebody that can kind of pick up quickly and just short leash with Zach Wilson? Like, hey, you got 3 drives, and if you don't produce nothing in 3 drives that we would like to see, then we're gonna have to sit you because we're in the mix of it. So it's kind of hard to say because, again, you kind of never know what you're gonna get with them. You can get the Kansas City Jets offense, or you can get last week's Jets offense or the Giants. You really just never know. That's one of those teams, and as a Cowboys fan, I can relate where it's just like you never know what you're gonna get from your team each Sunday.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And that's the thing I still have hope a little bit with is that Chiefs game. It wasn't like that was 3 years ago. That was this season. Like that happened this year. So it's in there somewhere. I'm still a proponent of trying to roll Zach out of the pocket a little bit more. They don't do that designed runs. The one thing we always say about Zach Wilson, we'll get to the Raiders side here in a second because I'm, again, sorry to the NFL fans that have got to watch the game tonight, but the one thing Zach has is his athleticism. He's very athletic. And I would like to see maybe some design runs. I also think against Crosby today, they got to run some heavy personnel, put a tight end, help whoever is going to be playing right tackle, because that is a fiasco in itself as well. Who in the world is going to be our offensive line tonight? And I think the play calling as well has not been good, but utilizing his legs, rolling him out of the pocket a little bit. He's just not a pocket passer. And anytime he has pressure, he panics. And that's where he, air mails it, throws picks. I mean, he's played turnover-free football, but, turnover-free football is good, but it's only going to be good for so long. If you can't put the ball in the end zone, the turnover-free football doesn't mean anything. He has 1 touchdown pass in the last 4 games, and that 1 touchdown pass was the check down to Breece Hall, where Breece took it and ran it for 50 yards. It was all Breece. Zach just threw a 3-yard check down. So tough spot to be in. You go to the Raiders' perspective, they're on the opposite end because the Jets, while things seem to be, again, we're right in the mix. And that's the thing, too, that I got to keep telling myself. We're right there. You win tonight, you're 5-4, you're right back in the mix of things. And then you get a Bills, Dolphins, teams that, if you go into that Dolphins game, they don't beat teams above 500. So maybe we go into that game above 500, they won't beat us again. But what is your thoughts on the Raiders? Because Antonio Pierce, they've got some new energy. They've got a new sign of life, optimism. You feel this is real in Vegas? Are they going to make a little bit of a run here? Or do you feel that was kind of just 1 week against the Giants and they're going to get that back down to reality?
They're going back to reality, but they're not going to look as bad as they've looked, earlier this year. I feel like Aiden O'Connell's going to come in and make a big difference. He looked very good in the preseason, but preseason is preseason. But I feel like he comes in and he kind of gives that spark that they needed because, as you can see, like, they're having fun playing football again. I think it was Hunter Renfrow that said it after the game, like, we're not walking on eggshells anymore. We're just having fun, like, playing the game like we did as kids. So I feel like if he can come in and just not turn the ball over, and I would actually let him air it out. Teams aren't expecting that. And they're kind of just like, hey, we're going to run the ball with Josh Jacobs, 20 times here. I would let him air the ball out and let Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers have their way, or at least try to with that Jet secondary.
Yeah, I think the key for the Jets is to keep Devontae Adams cooled down a little bit. He hasn't quite put up the numbers and hasn't gotten the targets. That's not his fault. I mean, he's been open. The quarterbacks just haven't seen him. Playing with Hoyer, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Aiden O'Connell is not extremely favorable for a receiver sometimes, but he's certainly got to look out for it tonight as well. This is a big game for the Raiders, just from a Raiders perspective, because their schedule is not getting easier. They have Miami on the road, then they've got Kansas City, the Vikings, Chargers, and the Chiefs again. You look at that schedule, that's tough, especially the Vikings.
Brutal.
Josh Dobbs led them to the comeback. So you feel like tonight for them, as long as I feel tonight's a must win for the Jets. I think for the same thing with the Raiders, you cannot go into that stretch of games 4-6. And for the Jets perspective, you can't go in the Buffalo and Miami back to back 4-5, or going into those 2 games 4-5 either. So important game for both these teams. While it might be a really bad, low scoring game, there is a lot of playoff, or at least season implications on the line. Not saying either of these teams are going to make the postseason, but they're still in the hunt, especially if one of these teams, especially if they come away with a win tonight. So what's your prediction for tonight? The Jets are 1-point favorites. The lines moved a little bit back and forth. Who do you got winning?
Whew, that's tough. Yeah. I feel like whoever punched the ball less is going to win this game.
Yeah,
and I think I'm going to take the Jets on this one. I just feel, again, with that defense, Aiden O'Connell coming in against this very, very talented defense, aggressive defense. It's not going to be easy for them. So give me the Jets and, like you said, a low-scoring game.
Yeah. I hope you're right. I mean, I would love to be wrong on this one. I think the Raiders will win this game. I just don't see enough right now out of this offense, but I hope I'm wrong. These are the picks that I hope I'm wrong. I hate picking against the Jets, but if I'm being completely honest, I don't think they win tonight's game, but I hope I'm wrong. The ESPN Analytics is giving them a 55.6% chance of winning, so they've got them as the favorites. They're giving them the win. I fully trust this defense, especially against a rookie. Get some pressure, force him into air throws against this secondary. It is so dominant. If they can do just enough, I think it's a 17-13, 16-13, 13-10 type game. If the Jets can find a way to muster up 16 points, I think they come away with the win. So if they can do that, if they can find a way, we'll see. We'll go to a couple other games here quickly. Texans, Bengals, and we'll also touch a little bit on the Lions, Chargers. Texans, Bengals. Bengals right now are hot. Texans, CJ Stroud is an absolute stud. What is your thoughts on this game?
Cincinnati, and I'm calling now. I just wrote an article out on it. Yep. Twitter's down at the bottom. If anyone wants to go read and check it out. Cincinnati is going to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl this year. I feel like they're too hot, and they do this kind of every year where they start off slow, and then they pick up some momentum, and it's like there's nothing stopping Cincinnati. And I feel like that's where they're kind of at right now. They are going to have some games where they don't look as hot, but they pull out these ugly wins like they did last year. This is going to be a good one. Houston is going to test them. That Cincinnati defense is very underrated, so I don't think Stroud is going to come out and have an amazing game, kind of how he did last week. But I feel like he's going to go out there and they're going to score some points. They're going to give Cincinnati a hard time. And this is going to be a game that's probably going to come down to the fourth quarter. Yeah. But I'm going to take Cincinnati if I had to pick.
Yeah, I'll take Cincinnati as well, but this is an excellent opportunity for CJ Stroud and a young Texans team. I think this is probably their toughest road test of the season. On the road, Cincinnati, hot team right now. Joe Burrow, good solid defense. Just beat up on the Bills on primetime last week. I think it's going to be really interesting to see. This is a good early test too for CJ Stroud. He got all the praise all week long. The crazy game got me 56 points in fantasy football. Was dominant, one of the best performances we've seen in a rookie ever. How does he go from a high like that now back down to, okay, got to prepare, got to be ready for a game on the road? That's going to be a good test for him early on to see just mentally if he can take the praise and take the hype, block out the noise, and get ready to play a game. I think it's a close game. This is one of the underrated games of the weekend. I'll take the Bengals. I just think the Texans are not quite there yet. They're not on the level of the Bengals just yet. So I'll take Cincinnati, but I do think this is a good game. And one other game here, Detroit Chargers. I'm on the Detroit train here in the NFC. They've got an opportunity here over the next couple weeks to really stack up some wins. They've got the Chargers this week, and after this, they got Bears, Packers, Saints, Bears, Broncos. I mean, that is very favorable schedule for them. What is your thoughts on Detroit going into this game? And then we'll quickly touch on the Chargers coming off a win.
I'm not saying I'm from the future, but before the season started, I did write a piece on Detroit, and I predicted that they win 12 games. And it's looking very favorable right now. Just last year, how that season ended, you kind of knew coming into this year, this team is going to be a lot different. And they got some big accusations in free agency to touch up that defense, which was their biggest problem last year. So now they tweaked up the defense like they needed. Jared Goff is playing amazing. I have Amon-Ra and David Montgomery both on my fantasy teams. So thank you, Jared Goff, for just having an amazing offense that you're out there running. So Detroit has been impressive. I feel like come playoff time, they're going to give a lot of teams a run for their money. A lot of issues. I'm hoping my Cowboys don't run up against them because I'm going to have to I'm gonna lean Detroit if we play against them. I just feel like both sides of the ball, they are one of the better teams. They're balanced, extremely balanced.
Yeah, and they're very well coached. My vote right now, if I had a vote for coach of the year, would be Dan Campbell. I mean, he's got those guys
Absolutely.
playing. He's got those guys playing hard. They are what he's done from when he took over that organization to where he is now. There's been constant progress from year 1 to year 2, from now to year 3, and they had a lot of hype going into the season, and so far they've lived up to the hype, 6-2, and that 12-win prediction is looking really good because they've got an opportunity here over the next couple of weeks coming out of the bye week to stack up a whole lot of wins as they head into the playoffs. And they've got a chance. They're 6-2. They can get to 7-2 today. Eagles are on a bye. Eagles are 8-1, obviously. They've got a chance to take over the top spot in the NFC. It's open there. So the Lions are definitely, they're just a feel-good story. All those years of, for the fan base, it's feel good. For Dan Campbell, former player, obviously, come over, has rebuilt that team from the ground up. A lot to like there. Going on to the Chargers, a little less, I guess, dominant or of an exciting season as what the Lions have been able to bring. But the Chargers are on a 2-game win streak. They took down the Jets in what was a must-win game for them on Monday night. What is your thoughts on the Chargers? Do you feel that this is the start of a little bit of a run for them, or do you feel they're going to get back down to reality in this game? And then they've got the Packers and the Ravens coming up after that. Packers are winnable, but the Ravens are tough. What is your thoughts on the Chargers? Like, they're a weird team. They've got talent. They're not very well coached. They're 4-4. They're still in it. Are you buying into the Chargers as a late season team that can pick up 9-10 wins and squeak into the AFC playoffs?
They are able to sneak in maybe 9 wins, but I don't believe in them. Who have they beat? I mean, you lose to Miami, which these were good games, but you beat all the playoff contenders or the Super Bowl contenders. So I'm really not believing in the Chargers. You're beating up on a bunch of bad teams, and you're barely beating up on these bad teams. I always I still think Justin Herbert's a little overrated as well. So I'm not really into the Herbert hype. I mean, for the sake of fantasy, once they get to the red zone, and they can do everything they need to do for Austin Eckler to get his points, because that's what I mostly need right now. But outside of really Justin Herbert and his check downs to Eckler, 45 times a game, I just don't think he's able to lead them to where they want to be. A lot of it does have to do with the defense not being what they thought they would be, but I just feel like with the talent that he has around him, they're just not where they should be.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And even last week against the Jets, Herbert only threw for 136 yards. He didn't have a touchdown. He fumbled the one play. The Jets obviously going to jump on it, but like he hasn't been quite the player that he hasn't been dominant. He's streaky. He's a streaky player. He has some really good games and he struggles, but you're spot on about they've beaten up on bad teams. Like all the teams that they've lost to the Chiefs, they lost to the Cowboys, they lost to the Dolphins, they lost to all the really solid playoff teams, but they beat the Raiders, they beat the Bears, beat the Vikings, beat the Jets, beat the Bears, as I mentioned. So an interesting team. Who you have winning this game, Lions or Chargers?
I'm taking the Lions. Absolutely. I don't think the Chargers have enough because, like I said again, with that Lions defense, this isn't a pushover defense. It's not a pushover team. So I haven't seen the Chargers. I think maybe the Miami game, it was the only one, and probably Minnesota as well, where they went and put up maybe 450, 500 yards in offense, and they're not doing that against this Lions defense.
Yeah, Chargers, the home dogs. I'll take the Lions as well. I've been buying in from the Lions just like you since the start. I think this is one of the more feel-good teams, a team that can certainly make a deep run. One of those teams come postseason time that I think could just be one of those kind of where you're just running into a buzzsaw at that point. That's how good they've been. So any closing thoughts here before we wrap up things here as we get set for week 10 of the NFL season? Patriots, Colts obviously got us started, and 1 o'clock throughout the rest of the day. And then tomorrow, Broncos, Bills. Any other closing thoughts on this Sunday?
Yeah, I would like to talk about that Broncos Bills. I kind of want to see what do you think going into that game on Monday? I know you being, inside the division rival. What do you feel about the Bills kind of lately? I want to see if we're on the same page as far as that.
Yeah, the Bills they're a little overrated, I think. I would certainly say that. They have not been the team that I think many expected. I mean, the Bengals have had their number forever. Last week that happened again. They beat them last year in their own building. I don't think the Bills are a like a Super Bowl contender. I don't think the Bills are going to go on and make the Super Bowl. I just don't. I think Allen, the turnover problem's concerning. I will say this, though. There are a lot of people out there that are like, oh, Josh Allen, he stinks. And I don't think he stinks. I think he's a little overrated. He's not. He's not like, I don't want to say he's not elite because he can make elite throws, but then he has those dumb decisions where he's got a turnover problem. There's no other way to put it. And quarterbacks with a turnover problem, not going to go deep in the playoffs. I don't think they're going to go very deep in the playoffs. And they're 5-4. I think they'll probably win this game just because the Broncos defense is so bad. I know they've been gotten a little bit better, but they're just so bad. And I just don't know if I still fully trust him. I mean, I know Russell Wilson actually hasn't had a bad year. He's actually had a very solid year statistically. But I mean, I like the Bills at home in this one, but for the rest of the season, I don't think the Bills are as good as maybe some still think. I know, they're 5-4. The reality is with the Bills, they're a pass interference. They're 2 pass interference penalties away from being 3-6. That's the reality of the situation. What are your thoughts on the Bills? Are we, do you agree with kind of my assessment there? I mean, I don't think, and their schedule only gets tougher. They got the Eagles still, they got the Chiefs still, they still got the Cowboys left. So things don't get easier for Buffalo. I mean, Diggs is unbelievable, but there certainly are some concerns with the team, especially defensively. They've lost some really key pieces, and those key pieces have been their missing presence has been felt.
100%. I don't believe in the Bills, and I think we spoke about it last week, but their championship window is gone. I don't even think they make the playoffs this year. I know it sounds crazy, but looking at, like I said, they should win tomorrow night. So we'll give them that win, give or take. But the rest of that schedule, like you just said, like we're talking about some teams that can make some very deep playoff runs. So I just don't think they're there yet. They're definitely not a championship team. But I would not be surprised if they do miss the playoffs because, again, going back to the AFC North, we are expecting some slippage between, the Steelers and the Browns. But out of those 2 teams, I feel like the Browns maybe is that one that won't slip off too much and could still find a way in the spot. So we're talking about 3 teams from that division alone, and then we're taking Miami. It's just I don't think there's enough space for them to get in there because their schedule is so tough, but also they just haven't looked how they've looked the last few years offensively, especially not defensively. So I feel like, I hate to say it for the Bills fans, but, you're probably going to pack the bags up this year and be done after week 18.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly see that happening. I still think they'll probably find a way to squeak in, but I mean, right now, if the season went to end today, they're not in the playoffs. They're the 8 seed right now. And that loss to Cincinnati hurts because if Cincinnati doesn't go on to, like, the reality is Cincinnati and Baltimore are both going to make the playoffs, most likely. But like if Cincinnati continues on this, like let's just say everybody in the AFC North kind of continues on this path, the Bills would probably fall out of that, wouldn't be able to make it just because of the tiebreaker they have with Cincinnati. And then depending on how all the tiebreakers break out. But yeah, the reality, they're not in the playoffs right now. And look, Denver's playing better. Just from a Jet fan perspective, obviously you're rooting for Denver because as a Jet fan, we want the playoffs to still be open. The division is kind of still open, although I don't think that'll happen. But yeah, the Bills are not the team. I think 2 years ago was their chance to win. That 13 seconds year where they lost to the Chiefs, I think that was their year. If they would have beat the Chiefs, then that was their season. But since then they've regressed. They're a 5-4 team in my eyes, just isn't a legit Super Bowl title contender. I will say this though. There are a lot of people that are like, oh, Josh Allen, we got to get rid of him. I can't stand watching Josh Allen. And I will say this to the people that are, saying I can't stand watching Josh Allen. You want to watch bad quarterback play? Come watch us for 2 weeks and you'll never ever complain about Josh Allen being a really bad quarterback. And, you're tired of watching him. Like, there are so many people out there that want Josh Allen gone. And I'm not denying that he has not been elite. He's got a turnover problem. He's got 9 picks. That's probably near the top of the league. He's got some problems, no doubt about it. And those turnovers are not good either. Some of these throws, you have no clue where the heck he's trying to throw the football. But you want to watch bad quarterback play, come watch the Jets. And unfortunately, everybody will see them back on Sunday night. So long video here. Any other closing thoughts before we head out of here?
Nope, just gonna wait now for 4 o'clock and
Yep.
enjoy some football. Catch up on this Patriots Colts game if there's much offense going on.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's an interesting game there for those two teams. Just quickly here, who do you got winning that Bills game?
I'm gonna take the Bills. I feel
Bills
like
win.
it's not easy to go into Buffalo and
No.
win that game, and they kind of know what they're up against for the remainder of the season. Especially, you don't want to look ahead, but I think they're looking ahead just a little bit. Like, we don't got much room for error considering the opponents down the road. So I'm gonna take Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm going to take Buffalo as well. And something else, Buffalo coming off a loss this year is 3-0 right now. They're 3-0 coming off a loss. They lost week 1 to the Jets, obviously. They came back and won 3 straight. Lost to Jacksonville, came back and won. Lost to New England, came back and won. So we'll see if that continues. I just think back home, it reminds you a little bit of that Tampa Bay Buccaneers game where they lost to New England. It was a brutal road loss. They came back home and obviously beat Tampa. I think that's going to be a similar situation. Tough road loss to Cincinnati. You come back home, Denver. Don't love their defense. I'll still take Buffalo, but there certainly are concerns there. So that'll do it for another episode. We'll be back next week talking more the NFL Week 11, but enjoy Week 10. We'll see how all of our picks play out for the Cowboys and the Jets. Hopefully we pick up 2 wins, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.